So I'd like to also unpack it through my speech to you. This was really inspired from the pandemic and also the years that followed. And you will see Orang Orang was also, kind of inspired because of the pandemic as well, in many ways, their work. It was a time when we saw extremes at play. We saw extreme inclusion and exclusion as well during that period of time. So the intersection between DEI and the concept of humanity rebalanced, this is how we see it. It speaks to the larger transformative shifts that are needed to create a more just, a more inclusive, and a more sustainable world. While DEI traditionally focuses on addressing systemic inequalities within institutions, within workplaces, and communities, Humanity Rebalanced envisions a broader realignment of human values, of relationships, and systems to prioritize justice, equity, and the well-being of all people, and the planet, of course. So today, ladies and gentlemen, it's my privilege to be among a community of committed leaders, thinkers, change makers, practitioners, to discuss and share, and most importantly, action on the need to design systems and structures that considers humanity and strives to cultivate our most positive traits in our cultures, in our workplaces, and in our societies. And of course, for this to happen, we believe balance is critical. So for LeadWomen, this summit is not designed just to be a meeting of minds, which it is, and I can see some brilliant minds across the room here today, but it is also a call to action. An opportunity to reflect on our 13 years journey traveled so far, trying to bring some understanding to DEI and why this is so important, why it should be an imperative for businesses, but it is also to acknowledge the progress we have made, and we've come a very long way, and we are seeing such good things happen in organizations. Yesterday, actually, we celebrated many good initiatives across organizations for gender equality, and we had the WEPS Awards yesterday. But it is also to confront the challenges that remain ahead for us, for all of us, when it comes to DEI. And today we are not only convening to discuss these challenges before us, but it's also to celebrate our strength, our collective humanity. Each one of you who is sitting here today represents a very powerful voice in this ongoing journey, and one that requires relentless dedication, courage, and empathy. And as we begin, let us recognize that DEI is not just an abstract set of concepts. They are principles that will shape the way we interact, the way we lead, and the way we grow. We live in a very multi-racial, diverse region of the world, and it is an area where there has always been so much diversity. And this is a region where diversity is our legacy, and inclusion unites all of us. From our own experience at LeadWomen, this work is not easy. It asks for us to confront some very uncomfortable truths. It also asks us to dismantle some very strong entrenched systems of inequity. And it also builds bridges where there were once walls. So our commitment to DEI means striving to create workplaces where every individual feels seen, they feel heard, they feel valued, and that is regardless of whether they are of a certain race or gender or ability or identity or background. The theme this year's Humanity Rebalanced reflects a very powerful vision, ladies and gentlemen. It is a world where power, opportunity, and success are distributed not just based on privilege or circumstance, but more, it should be based on fairness, on equity, and on human potential. So it is about rebalancing not just systems, but really our shared understanding of what it means to be human. Standing together with those who are marginalized, as we just saw, and ensuring that their voices are also heard and their voices are also included. So before I go into a bit of the theme of Humanity Rebalanced, let us quickly just take stock of the essentials to underscore exactly what DEI represents. So we talk about it a lot, diversity, equity, inclusion. It is often seen as buzzwords. It is about topics for workplace training, it is about programs, it's about corporate checklists. But today we want to do it differently, and we want to go back thinking about it differently. But DEI is more than just that. It's a set of principles when you apply it holistically it can transform not only institutions, but entire societies. And I think as the corporate world and the private sector, we have a huge role to play in doing this. Diversity is about recognizing and valuing the multitude of identities, experiences, and perspectives that make up our global community. It is about embracing differences, not just in terms of race, ethnicity, and gender, but also in terms of age, sexual orientation, socioeconomic background, visible and invisible disabilities. But diversity is discomfort. When we are amongst people not like us, it is uncomfortable, it is difficult, and that is why we struggle so hard, right? And when we talk about equity, equity is the process to get to equality. It acknowledges that different individuals have different needs and barriers. It calls for fairness in the way resources and opportunities are distributed. And sometimes equity calls for inequality for certain groups in order to get all to equality. So we have to be able to accept that inequality to get to inequality. Inclusion ensures that every individual, regardless of our identity, feels welcomed, respected, empowered to contribute their full self to whatever community or environment that they are part of. Inclusion creates a sense of belonging, as we just saw again with the individual on stage, right? When he could hear his musical instrument played, he felt the sense of belonging. I'm included in this community. And he could take a seat with every one of us and be just like us. So together, DEI is about creating systems where people are not just included in theory, but where they can thrive in practice. Yet for many, DEI remains an aspiration rather than a lived reality. Systemic inequalities continue to marginalize people, particularly those of intersections of multiple identities. So this brings me to the concept of the summit, and let me try to put in place where we see the intersection of humanity rebalanced. At its core, humanity rebalanced envisions a world where the scales of power, opportunity, and human dignity are balanced in ways that have never been before. It is about reimagining systems and structures that have historically perpetuated inequality. It's about recalibrating our moral compass, ensuring that every individual, no matter where they come from or who they are, can share in the wealth of humanity's collective achievements. Again, humanity rebalance is not just about redistributing wealth. It is about rebalancing the narratives that shape how we see ourselves and each other. It's about dismantling hierarchies that have been constructed over centuries, the hierarchies that elevate some at the expense of others, and it is based on arbitrary factors of skin color, nationality, gender, or economic status. Now, the private sector has a very key role to play, and that is why we are so encouraged to see so many of you here today in the room, because it is a vital role that we play in equalizing the playing field in workplaces, to ensure that no one gets left behind because of cultural or social norms. There is power in collective strength. And if I can just share, in 2012, LeadWomen, together with very many key stakeholders, the regulators, the government, gender-focused groups, etc., worked to dismantle the barriers and change stereotypical biased mindsets in order to increase women representation on the boards of corporate Malaysia. Today, 12 years later, we have crossed the 30% target for women on boards and normalized gender diversity on boards. It was about rebalancing the narratives at the board level. It was about reshaping mindsets. And this is exactly what it's going to take for all of us to do that. We need to keep the conversations high. We need to keep the agenda on very strategic level, and it needs to be incorporated right from the very top. And that is why so many of you are here, because when you go back, our hope is that you will do just that. And rebalancing humanity is about recognizing that each of us carries the same intrinsic value. It's about redefining success and progress in terms that prioritize human well-being, environmental sustainability, and social justice. It means shifting our focus from individual gain to collective good, from exclusion to radical inclusion. We see this change coming as the private sector moves towards compliance to environment, social, and governance targets and frameworks. The sustainability agenda is starting to include the humanity element into the measurement of success. It's moving the thinking from individual gain to collective gain. And the intersection that comes with DEI and humanity rebalance lies in the understanding that true equity cannot be achieved in a world that remains unbalanced. A society that prioritizes well-being only for the privileged few cannot, by definition, be just nor inclusive. To rebalance humanity is to embrace the values of DEI on a global scale, understanding that equity and inclusion are not options, but fundamental human rights. As we embark on this journey together, we must confront some very difficult truths about where we stand today. Inequality is pervasive, it is systemic, and it is stubborn. So despite the progress we have made through social movements, through policy changes, through many corporate initiatives, deep disparities still remain. And these inequities are not confined to a particular region or group, they are actually woven into the very fabric of our global economy, political institutions, social norms that translate into subtle forms of exclusion in workplaces and exclusion in society. So wealth inequality, for example, has reached staggering levels, with the richest 1% owning more than half the world's wealth. The economic divide reinforces a cycle of exclusion, where marginalized groups have less access to education, healthcare, and unemployment opportunities, further entrenching this disenfranchisement. So if we are serious, ladies and gentlemen, about rebalancing humanity, we must acknowledge that the forces that are driving this inequality are multifaceted and it is interconnected. We cannot do one without the other. We cannot address racial inequality nor gender inequity without also confronting economic disparity. We cannot fight for gender equality without also advocating the rights of people with disabilities and other groups. So, what do we do going forward, right? We know all this, we talked about it, we keep talking about it in forums, on panels and conversations, so we need to move it from theory to action. And these are our thoughts as we leave it with you over the next 2 days. So, one, we believe that we need to redefine leadership. First, we must begin by redefining it. Leadership is a rebalance. In a rebalanced world, is not about power or control. It's about service. And today, at the CEO Roundtable, we're going to talk about human leadership because it is about service. It's about empowering others, particularly those who have historically been marginalized, to lead the way forward. This means creating spaces where diverse voices are not only heard, but are also driving decision-making processes. How many times do we talk about gender in an all-male environment? How many times do we talk about disabilities when everybody is fully abled, right? So we don't fully understand if we don't have them in our discussions. The second one, we believe, is about dismantling the structural barriers. Second, we must do that to remove inequalities. This requires a collective commitment to policy reform, to resource distribution and the transformation of institutions that have perpetuated exclusion. Whether it be education, healthcare, or the workplace, we must advocate for policies that center equity and inclusion at their core. And we are going to talk a lot about this in some of the panels today. We'll talk about the Great Rebalance. We're going to talk about it in breakout sessions where we have disabilities as one of our breakout sessions. We also have ageism in another breakout session. So please ensure that you've got yourselves booked into one of these breakouts to further go into detail on these categories. And third, we must foster a culture of care and empathy. Rebalancing humanity requires us to see each other's full humanity, to listen deeply to one another's experiences, and to act with compassion. It means recognizing that the pain of exclusion, the weight of injustice, and the fight for dignity are shared struggles, and it affects all of us. The adoption of DEI principles brings focus to healthy work culture, engagement with employees, values that prioritize fairness and respect. And lastly, ladies and gentlemen, we must build alliances across movements and communities. Oops, it's falling down. I hope it doesn't say no. Okay, addressing racial justice, gender equality, disabilities rights, environmental justice are not separate battles, as I've already said. They are part of the same struggle for human dignity. By building alliances across these movements, we can create a powerful force for change that rebalances the scales of power and opportunity. And that we have seen in the course of our work. We are only here today doing what we are doing, talking about what we are talking, because of our very strong alliances, partnerships, and people who believe in the cause. And that I will not, that has got us where we are today. So over the next 2 days, we will explore new perspectives, challenge our assumptions, collaborate to build actionable strategies that can drive change in our workplaces, in our communities, and in our societies. So let us remember, the solutions we seek are not merely institutional, they are personal. They are rooted in how we choose to show up for one another each day. And in conclusion, ladies, we must leave the summit not only with ideas, but with a deep, unshakable commitment to creating a world that is more just, more compassionate, and more inclusive. And we should consider practices that build awareness and equanimity, practices that celebrate our common humanity and break the walls of indignity. And we must practice and build, and one thing we truly believe at LeadWomen, build kindness and compassion for self and others. In closing, I encourage each of you to engage with this summit with an open heart and a commitment to listen deeply, speak courageously, and act intentionally. Thank you.